Deep in the Pentagon, a senior American general stared at the latest intelligence briefing, his surprise unmistakable. The room was thick with tension, the air humming with the realization that something fundamental had shifted across the Atlantic. Europe, long seen as dependent on the US for security, was now making bold moves that few in Washington had truly anticipated. The decision to withdraw from the Ottawa Convention and redeploy landmines was just the beginning, a signal that Europe was ready to take controversial steps to defend itself. At the same time, France and Britain were launching a new nuclear dialogue, opening channels that had been dormant for decades, and discussing shared deterrence strategies. In Paris, a multinational military force was taking shape, with troops from across the continent training side by side, forging a new sense of European unity and purpose. For years, Washington had urged Europe to take defense seriously, often with little result. Now those calls were being answered in ways that exceeded American expectations. Europe was not just catching up, it was surging ahead, investing in new technologies, expanding its rapid deployment forces, and demonstrating a level of coordination unseen in recent memory. The general exchanged glances with colleagues. The old challenge of European reluctance had been replaced by the urgent need to keep pace with Europe's newfound resolve and ambition. The speed and unity of Europe's actions were unprecedented, forged in the crucible of the ongoing war in Ukraine and the persistent threat from Russia. The continent was responding to crisis with a clarity and determination that surprised even its closest allies. European leaders were no longer just talking about strategic autonomy, they were building it, fast. New bases, new agreements, and new capabilities were coming online at a pace that signaled a permanent shift. The continent was shedding decades of complacency, driven by the realization that peace could no longer be assumed. Ordinary citizens, once confident in the post-Cold War order, now watched as their societies mobilized for a new era of uncertainty. For American officials, this was a moment of profound recalibration. The familiar playbook of transatlantic relations was suddenly out of date. The US, long the senior partner, now faced a Europe stepping forward as a co-equal, confident, assertive, and ready to shape its own destiny. This new dynamic brought both opportunities and risks. A stronger Europe could be a more capable and reliable ally, sharing burdens and responsibilities more evenly, but it also meant a more independent and potentially unpredictable partner, one that might chart its own course in moments of crisis. The Pentagon's surprise was the dawning recognition that the world had changed, and America's relationship with its oldest allies would have to change too. The balance of power and trust was being renegotiated in real time. The era of a passive Europe was over. A new chapter in transatlantic security had begun, one defined by shared resolve, mutual respect, and the unpredictable challenges of a rapidly changing world. Europe's resolve is a direct response to a threat seen as existential and multifaceted: Russia. Russia is outproducing all 32 NATO allies in ammunition and weaponry, signaling preparation for a long-term confrontation. Beyond military buildup, Europe faces relentless hybrid warfare, sabotage, cyber attacks, and disinformation campaigns designed to destabilize societies. Czech and German intelligence warn of coordinated Russian strategies to expand influence and undermine the West. Russian hackers target critical infrastructure, forcing Europe into a costly, constant cyber defense. These are not isolated incidents, but a comprehensive campaign to dismantle the post-Cold War order. Europe's dramatic policy shifts are fueled by this holistic, generational threat. The continent is responding not just to Ukraine, but to a broader challenge to its security and way of life. In response to mounting threats on its borders, Europe has launched a historic rearmament drive, marking a turning point in its approach to security and defense. The EU presidency has called for full rearmament within 5 years, a strategic imperative as Russia's defense spending now exceeds that of all EU states combined. This urgent call to action is reshaping priorities across the continent, as leaders recognize the need to close the widening gap in military capabilities. At the next NATO summit, members will pledge billions more to overhaul militaries and replenish depleted stocks. These investments are not just about numbers, but about building resilience and readiness for the challenges ahead. This is more than buying tanks. It's a fundamental overhaul of Europe's defense industry, ramping up production of everything from artillery shells to drones. Factories are running at full capacity, and new technologies are being rapidly integrated to meet modern warfare demands. Joint procurement and collaboration are key, aiming for a defense industry capable of sustaining high-intensity conflict. By pooling resources and expertise, European nations hope to achieve greater efficiency and interoperability on the battlefield. Germany and Norway are leading by funding advanced air defense systems for Ukraine, reflecting a shared understanding that security is the foundation of prosperity. Their support signals a broader commitment to collective defense and solidarity with vulnerable allies. The peace dividend of the 1990s is gone. Europe must now build a credible deterrent of its own. The era of complacency has ended, replaced by a renewed focus on readiness and strength. While NATO remains the bedrock, leaders know they can't rely solely on American power. The shifting geopolitical landscape demands that Europe take greater responsibility for its own defense. The goal, a European pillar within NATO, strong enough to handle regional crises independently. This vision is driving unprecedented cooperation and investment across the continent. It's a race against time to forge a shield against the storms gathering to the east, as Europe faces a future where its security can no longer be taken for granted. Europe's most controversial move is the return to anti-personnel landmines. Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Finland are withdrawing from the mine ban treaty, choosing to fortify their eastern borders. Critics warn of civilian harm, but these governments see minefields as a crucial deterrent against Russian invasion. The strategy makes any advance costly and slow, channeling forces into kill zones. Ukraine's use of mines has already demonstrated their effectiveness in stalling Russian offensives. This decision marks a return to Cold War-style defenses, and a rejection of post-1991 optimism. For frontline states, the fear of Russian tanks outweighs the ideals of arms control. Europe is also building new military tools, like the Coalition of the Willing, a multinational force for post-ceasefire operations in Ukraine. This initiative brings together soldiers and resources from across the continent, uniting countries that once acted separately into a single, coordinated effort. The coalition is designed to respond quickly to emerging threats and maintain stability in a region that has seen years of conflict. With U.S. representatives involved, this force signals a new level of transatlantic cooperation. It demonstrates that Europe and America are working hand in hand, sharing intelligence, resources, and strategic goals to ensure peace and security in Ukraine and beyond. Headquartered first in Paris, then London, the coalition reflects Franco-British leadership at its core. This dual leadership is symbolic, showing unity between two of Europe's strongest military powers. The force is designed to police ceasefires, monitor troop withdrawals, and help regenerate Ukraine's defense capabilities for the future. The coalition will train and equip Ukrainian forces, secure airspace and maritime routes, and act as a guarantor of peace. It will also support humanitarian efforts and help rebuild critical infrastructure, ensuring Ukraine can recover and defend itself. Its credibility is paramount, sending a message to Moscow that Europe is committed for the long haul. The coalition's presence is meant to deter further aggression and reassure allies that Europe stands united and resolute. This is a major step toward integrated European defense, moving beyond ad hoc crisis responses. It marks the beginning of a more permanent, structured approach to collective security on the continent. The coalition is a flexible tool, able to act without relying solely on NATO or EU structures. This independence allows Europe to respond faster and more effectively to crises in its own backyard. Europe is building the capacity to act decisively in its own neighborhood, shaping its own security future and taking greater responsibility for peace and stability across the continent. As nuclear threats loom, Europe's two nuclear powers, France and the UK, are deepening cooperation. The combined Joint Expeditionary Force will expand to 50,000 troops, creating a rapid deployment force. More significantly, Paris and London are discussing nuclear deterrence coordination, a profound shift. This signals to Moscow that nuclear blackmail will not divide Europe but strengthen its resolve. Non-nuclear states are reassured by a more proximate European nuclear umbrella. The Franco-British nuclear entente is now a cornerstone of European security, reflecting a sober assessment of global realities. By coordinating their deterrence, France and the UK are reshaping Europe's strategic calculus. This shift has spurred Europe's rearmament, but America is not withdrawing. Instead, the partnership is evolving. U.S. military aid to Ukraine continues, providing capabilities Europe can't yet match. The U.S. is now a key enabler, amplifying European efforts rather than acting alone. Economic warfare is coordinated, new sanctions and plans to use frozen Russian assets for Ukraine's reconstruction. The alliance is rebalancing, with Europe taking more responsibility for its own security. The US still provides essential support, but now alongside a more capable European partner. This evolving partnership may prove more resilient and effective in the long run. Europe's flurry of activity is driven by the belief that the Russian threat is generational, not temporary. Leaders are preparing for a prolonged era of confrontation, investing in defense and societal resilience. The 5-year rearmament plan aims to restore a military balance that can endure for decades. Efforts extend beyond hardware. Counter-disinformation, cybersecurity, and public education are all part of the strategy. This is a whole-of-society effort, recognizing that modern conflict is fought on many fronts. Europe's success or failure will shape international security and the future of democratic alliances. If Europe builds a credible deterrent, it could establish a new equilibrium. If not, it risks emboldening adversaries worldwide. Europe is on the front line of a defining geopolitical contest. Its bold moves are about survival and about shaping the future of global power.